is Baroness Nicky Morgan. Now, Nicky is, as you remember, was Secretary of State for Education. She was also Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. And in those roles, she promoted character across the United Kingdom and has been very vocal ever since in this area as well. Her first book was Education for 21st Century Character, which was extremely well received and praised. But I have to say that the book here that she wrote with me, Character for a Characterful Society, this is Education for Characterful Society, it was a book that came out last September, and Nicky and I contributed to that as well. So she's also a senior research fellow, honorary research fellow of the Jubilee Centre. So it gives me great pleasure to ask Nicky to say a few words about Tom's new book.
Well, good evening, everybody. James, thank you for that kind introduction. I want to start by offering my congratulations to Tom on writing his book. I know from my limited experience just how hard it is to write a book. It's easier to have the great idea, and I think that the idea at the heart of Tom's book is a fantastic idea. It's something that it doesn't take very long as a parent when you meet other parents before everybody starts talking about the online world and how you can help your child to deal with it. And what I particularly like about Tom's book is that it is so positive, and that the use of the word thrive and flourish in the online world is exactly what we want our young people to do. Now, as James has said, I contributed to a book that alongside some esteemed authors, including James himself, and I touched very briefly on this online world, because James himself has said that character is all about what we do, the decisions we make when no one else is looking. And actually the online world is a place where often no one else is necessarily looking at what we do, but they do see how we respond. Whether it's in posting on social media, whether it's in the tone of the email that we send, or whether it's participating and behaviour in online gaming. And I say that as a mum of a 13-year-old who, unfortunately, due to homeschooling, is getting far too much access to the world of online gaming. The digital world isn't going to go anywhere. And I'm also a member of a House of Lords committee on life beyond COVID. And we've just seen in the last year how the digital world, digital life online has just massively accelerated. And for our young people, I think as Tom sets out in his book, when his daughter is getting their first iPhone, they're getting younger as they get more and more connected online and not just offline. And so I think what's really fantastic about this book is to see that the character framework, which I suspect that the reason you're here tonight, hopefully, is you're either a great supporter and know that the impact that character education, the positive impact it has on our young people, or you're intrigued by it and you think, well, what is this character thing? Why does everybody go on about it? What could I do? How could it benefit the young people that I work with or the young people in my life? Character education, as James and many others in Jubilee Centre have set out, is an age-old thing. It's been called under different titles, but actually the ability, as I say, for people to make good decisions when they have to is something we want all of our young people to do. And so I think, as I say, seeing the character framework applying into a new world, to an online world, where frankly we do want the rules that apply offline to apply online too. Now, Tom writes that character is key to thriving online, and we're going to hear more about that from our speakers and obviously from Tom himself. I think we're going to hear a lot more about the phrase cyber wisdom, and I think that's something that we can absolutely challenge not only young people in our lives, but all of us. Are we practicing cyber wisdom? The thing that was in my first book on character, the thing that struck me as Education Secretary, talking to people like James, like Tom and others involved in character work, is that we need to be deliberate about character education. The premise of my book was that it needs to be taught and not just caught and left to chance. And I think Tom goes on to say it's not just it's not caught, it's not taught, it needs to be sought. And I think that's right. We need to seek out good character education, be deliberate about it. And we need to be deliberate about it, as he argues, in the online world, in the digital age of the 21st century and beyond. Now, as Education Secretary, I talked a lot about getting young people ready for the digital age. Often at that time, what we meant was things like coding, computer science. But actually, if we think that the online world is here to stay, it's going to be a dominant part of our lives and the lives of the next generation, then actually character, deliberate teaching about character in that world is going to be phenomenally important and runs right the way through. It's not just about certain types of digital ability, it runs right the way through. We conduct ourselves online. And so in the brief time available, really all I want to leave you with is the thought, exactly as Tom does in the book, to think about the kind of person that we want to be, the values, the virtues that we want to exhibit, no longer just in the offline world, but in the online world too. Being kind, not being nasty, thinking about the things that we post, the conduct that we exhibit online. And I'll just read you one final thing from the chapter in Educating for a Characterful Society. As we've discovered in 2020, staying safe and keeping others safe requires all of us to do our bit and make judgments accordingly. And that judgment call applies each time we post a comment on social media, as much as whether we decide to socially distance or wear a mask. Tom, it's great to see the book. I think it's going to be a fantastic read, very well received by everybody, and I'm delighted to be here tonight. Many congratulations.
Thank you very much, Nicky, for that. That's excellent, great start. We're going to move immediately to Dr. Carrie James. Carrie is from Harvard University, and her background is as a sociologist, and she explores the digital, moral, and civic lives of young people. She's the author of Disconnected, Youth, New Media, and the Ethics Gap. So you're very welcome. Carrie, over to you.
Thank you so much, James. I have a few slides, and whenever those are ready, that would be great. I'm really delighted to be here. I know that Tom's book is going to bring so much wisdom to the field, and I'm excited to share a few insights from my research just to underscore the importance of Tom's book. So next slide. So for over a decade, I've been working with my colleague, Emily Weinstein, to explore the ins and outs of adolescents' digital lives, so that age group in particular. And our work really looks at how young people navigate thorny digital issues, or what we call digital dilemmas, across different spheres of life. And a central question in this that I think Tom is getting at in his book is, how are adults supporting them? And what more could they and should they be doing to support young people in a really complicated landscape? We've done a ton of research, mainly through surveys, thousands of adults, but also young people. And actually over the past month, we've been carrying out a fascinating set of virtual focus groups and interviews with teens about current digital topics. So we're swimming in a lot of data, but I think I wanted to share a couple of key insights from that this evening. Our work really finds that dilemmas abound for teens in connected life, and they routinely face situations where the right thing to do is far from clear, and where even adults disagree about right versus wrong. Let me share a couple of examples. Next slide. So is what people do or say in public fair for others to record and post? Is it okay for people to share violent videos to call attention to what's happening in the world? These dilemmas are high on the minds of teens who struggle daily with questions like, how do I share my perspectives on civic issues, issues like Black Lives Matter, in authentic versus performative ways on social media? That particular dilemma actually bleeds into young people's social lives, where friendships can really end over the content of online posts, including taking different sides on an issue or just being silent on an issue like racial justice. Further tensions teens feel are related to closeness in an always-on age. How much connection is too much? And does being a good friend mean being available whenever your friend needs you? Next slide. So a common thought adults have, or something they even say out loud to teens, is, can't you just get off your phone? And a key finding in our work is that young people struggle in ways that aren't always obvious to adults, in ways that go beyond an inability to just put down their phone. Some teens, when we talk to them about digital life, name pressures to always stay connected as a top worry about growing up in today's digital world. Next slide. And when we ask them to say more about them, these are some of the kinds of things that they share. Things like, if you're not connected, then your friendships will fall apart. Or, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings if I can't stay in touch. We really hear in quotes like this heartfelt concerns from young people about jeopardizing friendships if they don't stay connected. Next slide. And then we have a further sentiment. My biggest worry is if I don't have enough contact with friends who are struggling, I don't want them to do something bad just because I didn't respond in time to stop them from harming themselves. We've heard stories about teens struggling with worries like this about both close friends and more distant peers who signal in public contexts like stories on Instagram or Snapchat that they're really struggling with mental health issues. And how to interpret those public cries for help are key puzzles that young people face. So big picture, I wanted to share some of these insights because they really shed light on the complexities that are happening behind teen screens. Concerns like being there for friends who struggle can be really powerful barriers to walking away, to disconnecting and putting their phones down. I just want to add a few more current insights. Next slide. In the focus groups we've been conducting with teens recently, we asked a pivotal question: what do you wish adults understood about your digital life? And it yielded a range of responses across topics. Responses about screen time, like, just because we're on a device doesn't mean we're wasting our time. And, you know, those connections are really important to learn and grow. I need that connection right now. Next slide. But we also hear about stresses and complications, like not all of our time on our phones is fun. It can be upsetting. Maintaining friendships is complicated. And things like, just because you have a lot of followers on Instagram doesn't mean that you have lots of friends. These voices really show that there's often much more than meets the eye when we see young people on their devices. Next slide. So I share these insights because I think they really underscore so much of Tom's book. And I wanted to highlight a couple of things that I think are especially relevant in the advice he tries to give. So first, be an advisor. And I really appreciate here Tom's characterization of adults being in advisory roles and really working in partnership with young people, not about being in power. He underscores the importance of listening and being understanding and courageous, and emphasizes that, of course, it's not easy work. This is really essential and valuable. He also speaks to being an exemplar. He notes that the aim is to try to be thick exemplars, doing our best despite the complexities of real life. And I really love this sentiment. He goes on to say that it involves our children seeing us struggling sometimes to do the right thing. It really calls attention to the fact that digital life is complicated, and sometimes we can lean on issuing commandments about how to behave, but so many situations that young people face belie those simplistic rules of thumb. And it's really important to model, even in the messiness, where figuring out the right thing to do is really hard. So those are just two pearls of wisdom from Thrive. Congratulations, Tom. I'll pause here and just say thanks for the opportunity to share some insights from my work. And I'm excited for the conversation that will unfold for the rest of the session.
Thank you very much, Carrie, for that excellent talk. I want to move now from Boston, from Harvard, to Rome, Italy. And I want to introduce Jessica Alexander. Now, Jessica is a best-selling author who wrote The Danish Way of Parenting, and it's been published in 28 different countries already. She's a journalist, And she's also written for Time magazine, for the Wall Street Journal, for the BBC News, for the New York Times, for the Atlantic. I could go on. She's widely read, and she's written extensively for many media. Jessica, over to you. Have we lost Jessica, Joe?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. Rome, you know, never know. Tom, I want to say congratulations. That was a nice introduction. Apart from some of the other things, I'm also a cultural researcher, and I have lived in many countries, and I speak 4 languages. And one of the reasons I wrote The Danish Way of Parenting is because I'm so inspired, and I believe very deeply in the parenting philosophy of cultivating character values, both in ourselves and in our children. And I think it's one of the reasons why a country like Denmark is constantly voted as one of the happiest countries in the world, 40 years in a row. And I'm convinced it's because of the focus on character values. And this is one of the reasons why I liked Tom's book so much, because it was focusing on exactly that, not just in the real world, but in the cyber world. And one of the concepts which really resonated for me, and I feel like it will with a lot of parents, is the idea of us being digital immigrants. So we are living in this cyber world now that is kind of like a new country for a lot of us, and our children are digital natives. So they have grown up in this world, they speak the language, they know the playgrounds, they know the sandbox, it's completely normal. Whereas for us, it's new. And one of the reasons this resonated so much for me is because I am an immigrant. I live in Italy, I've lived in Scandinavia and Belgium. And I know it's what Tom mentions in the book is there's such a difference between being the kind of person that embraces your new country and welcomes it and tries to learn the language and cultivates the wisdom of this new place together with your children, or the people that feel forced to live in this new country where they complain, they don't want to learn the language, they're upset that their children are growing up in this world, and there's a lot of negativity and rules. And so it's probably not a surprise the most successful immigrants are the ones who adapt and are very creative. And I love this because I think it's exactly the way we need to be looking at this new country, this technological world that we're all living in, and how can we cultivate digital citizens, raise our children to be good digital citizens in this world, just like we would in the online world. I thought Tom's book was super easy to read. It was very clear. I read a lot of parenting books, so I appreciated how it wrapped up everything in a very concise way. He uses acronyms to help parents react, which is being a rule maker, an exemplar, character champion, as well as an acronym for helping kids thrive. So being thoughtful, having integrity, being virtuous. And these are all values that I believe in so profoundly. I think it's just so important. And I think the more we're able to embrace our new land together, the more successful and connected we will be with our children. And this is something else I really loved, is the way he approaches it with very much inclusion of our children in the rules. It's not just about us controlling and a power down approach, but it's the tone, being non-judgmental. And in Denmark, for example, there's a verb, the verb to teach, at lære, actually means to teach and to learn, because they really believe that the teacher and the taught together do the learning. And we know from research, we can see this in countries, that when children feel included, they're much more likely to embrace this philosophy. They're much more likely to trust. They're much more likely to be trustworthy. So I think it's really the right way to approach this new situation we find ourselves in. I am actually teaching my daughter right now using Tom's book, and it's going fantastic. I would like to wrap up just saying that I focus a lot on well-being and happiness. And I did some work with Lego where we followed a lot of families globally and found that families who play digitally with their children, not just in the real world, but also play digitally, are reporting to be happier than families who don't. So it's just another proven example across the globe that we need to come into this new country and see it as a journey. If we see it as a journey and we embrace it, then Tom's book is a great guidebook to teach us how to get there and help our children do the right thing when nobody's watching. And I think that's the most important tool we can give them. So thanks again, Tom. It's been a great read.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. It's really appreciated. Now we're going to move from Rome, Italy to San Francisco. And I've just realized it's 2:30 in the morning in San Francisco. So I have to say, Dr. Kelly Mendoza, who's the next speaker, I'm absolutely delighted you're with us and you stayed up until that time in the morning. So Tom owes you one, he really does. Now, Kelly has been the senior director at Common Sense Media in the USA, which is one of the biggest providers of digital citizenship education. It's a sort of non-profit organization. And we at the Jubilee Centre have worked with Kelly, which you probably might know that because with the Kern Family Foundation and also the USA Public Broadcasting Service, we helped with some materials for character in the States as well. So we worked alongside, and Kelly has been working with them, has produced many materials for them as well. So over to you, Kelly.
Hello and good morning from San Francisco. It's not 2 in the morning, it is 10:30 in the morning. So rest assured, Tom, I am not up in the middle of the night. But thank you so much for inviting me to speak today, and congratulations on the launch of Thrive. As was mentioned, I'm with Common Sense Media, and we are an NGO. We're headquartered in San Francisco, and we all of our work is around helping parents and educators and children thrive in a world of media and technology. So we do 4 things. We rate and review media for families to help parents make good decisions about their kids' media. We advocate on behalf of passing policy and legislation on issues relevant to children and families, media and technology. We investigate by doing original research on kids and media issues, and we educate by providing free programs for schools. And that last point is what I'll be talking about today. And so all of our resources are available at commonsense.org. And so what I was particularly honed in on and love to see with Thrive is that Tom is teeing up, this book is for parents, but a lot of the strategies here can be used and implemented in schools. And so we've learned a lot about how to teach digital citizenship in schools through our work at Common Sense over the past 10 years. And so I wanted to talk about some intersections with the ideas from Tom's book and highlight a few of things that I've noticed of what we found works with teaching these competencies and character and digital citizenship in schools. So in Thrive, Tom asks us to consider what it means to support children to flourish online by using virtue ethics theory through that lens. And he encourages us to ask, ourselves, and even for the children that we support. What do we want this world to look like? How should we and our children participate and behave, to make a better world? And what should we do when we face dilemmas with really no clear-cut right or wrong answer? And so my work over the past 10 years has been supporting schools with our free digital citizenship curriculum. And in fact, we've worked closely with Carrie James, who spoke earlier, and her colleague Emily Weinstein to integrate their research findings into our approaches in our lessons. And so we see digital citizenship as a set of skills and dispositions to use technology responsibly to learn, create, and participate in our world. It's not a set of do's or don'ts about internet safety, and rather we see it as how Tom says, a good citizen is, quote, someone who is seeking to make the place that they live, be that on a local, national, or global level, better for themselves and for others, end quote. And that's kind of the lens that we take. There's your focus on yourself and your broader community and the globe, because as we participate online, we are participating in a global world. And so our program addresses these top concerns for educators to help prepare students to make smart choices online and in their lives. And we address 6 main topics, ranging from online privacy issues, digital footprint, online bullying and hate speech, relationships and communication issues, news and media literacy, and what we call media balance and well-being. And we have a pretty large audience in the States, and actually the UK is our second largest audience outside of the States. And so in fact, we on Safer Internet Day, we'll be launching our UK lessons to support the UK countries. So Thrive focuses on how parents and guardians can use the React and Thrive models to cultivate cyber wisdom for children to help them thrive with compassion and honesty and integrity. And here's some things that struck me as I read the book, and Tom, in thinking through like an educator lens. I'm a parent too, by the way. I have a 9-year-old who does not yet have her first cell phone, but I'm grappling with preparing myself and doing other things in terms of my modeling as an exemplar for her. So here are things that we've learned with schools from this perspective and with teachers. First, to help children flourish online, our approach must be proactive and preventative. And this was actually mentioned a couple times before. So Tom mentions in the book that teaching students character education and digital citizenship sometimes comes up as a reaction or a remedy to something negative that happens in the school. And a lot of these issues happen at school or home. It's kind of like the lines are blurred. So maybe there was a cyberbullying incident happening. Maybe something inappropriate was shared. And you could probably think of another example in your own school community. And so I appreciate how the approaches that Tom provides in Thrive, they're preventative. The goal here is to cultivate at all stages of a child's life what it means to be thoughtful, to be human, to be reasonable, to have integrity, and to be virtuous and an exemplar. And I love, the personal experiences that are woven in from your own life, Tom, and how you struggled as a parent and, making that decision around the first phone. That's probably one of the top questions we get at Common Sense. When do I get my child his or her first phone? But, that you're doing that in a deliberate, a preventative, and an ongoing way. With children. And so schools are seeing the value in teaching these things, not only to prevent negative things from happening, but to create a positive culture around media and technology. The second point around that is, that's related to the first one, is that digital citizenship is seen by schools who do this successfully as a foundation for successful digital learning. And so the schools that we see that have created a positive culture around media and technology, they see it not as a one and done or a flavor of the day, but they see it as a real important set of competencies that set a foundation for effective learning and technology use. And yes, we know that teachers are strapped for time and they're asked to do a million things. And we know that they're focused on their subject areas typically, but we see digital citizenship and character woven into English, civics, even science and math. And we also see schools teaching it as part of technology and character education. Maybe there's independent class. But in thinking of all this, I absolutely love this quote from Tom in which he says, if teachers get character education right, then it should not be another thing on their plate, but the plate itself, a plate that everything else rests upon, end quote. So that to me is exactly what we see in schools that are doing this successfully. They're seeing this not as a one-off, not as like flavor of the day, but as a foundation for digital learning. And you know, the more that they've integrated it into their foundation, the more successful they are in creating a positive culture around media and technology in the school community. So the last point I want to make is to help children flourish online, this requires a whole community approach. And so this is sort of tying it all together. And by whole community, I'm referring to teachers and school leaders and students working together around these issues and supporting each other. So, you know, parents and guardians, they look to the school, they're looking to the school around support in these issues. And increasingly over the past year with the pandemic, we went to distance learning overnight. And even now more than ever, a close homeschool connection and support from the school around these issues is important. So Tom's book is a great way for schools to actually, you know, provide a resource for parents and some techniques and the models that they could be using. And also he provides a lot of really practical ideas and questions and dilemmas towards the end of the book that I really love as part of this whole community approach. So I hope that gives you a window in just a few things that we've learned from schools and how teachers can play a role in supporting children to thrive and flourish online. And I hope that you enjoy reading Thrive and can apply these models to the children that you support in your life. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kelly. I do apologize. I'm saying I must have got jet lag going across from Rome to San Francisco. I got the hours right. It's 8 hours behind, isn't it? Sort of thing, rather than forward. So sorry about that. But anyway, we're moving now from San Francisco to Derbyshire, England, where Tom lives. And I want to say a few words about Tom. I've been working with Tom for the last 20 years. I met him over 20 years ago, and we've been working very closely together. Tom was actually there in the House of Lords in 16th of May 2012 when the Jubilee Centre was founded. So it's natural that he's still with us because Tom is such a hard worker and he's got great vision, very proactive. And he's our Director of Education, and he's also Director of the MA programme that we founded in the Jubilee Centre as well for the MA in Character. So he's an absolutely great guy. Tom has spoken to tens of thousands of parents and teachers all over the world. And I was just thinking about that. I went to Mexico City with Tom, and Tom spoke to over 1,500 parents there. Just recently in London at the World Congress of Families, another 1,500 people, Tom was the keynote speaker. His face was on all the posters around Westminster. It's incredible. So Tom has really made a huge impact. He's a reader in the School of Education at Birmingham University, and he's also a principal fellow of the Higher Education Academy. Tom is certainly on the move, and this book is a fantastic book. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, James. I feel truly humbled by your words, but also I want to say a huge thank you from the start to Baroness Morgan, Nicky Morgan, Carrie James, Jessica Alexander and Kelly Mendoza for their really kind and inspirational words. I am really humbled what you said about the book, and quite surprised by some of my my quotes and wisdom in it. It's been lovely to have it repeated back, but so much of what I've written has come from what yours and other people's thoughts as well. So thank you so much for giving your time to speak today. And wow, thank you to all of you who've joined today. It's been somewhat, I have to say, in this household, nervous anticipation as we've been planning towards this event and their build-up, but it's really brought some light to perhaps a darker start to the year for many of us, and your participation has brought a really massive smile to my face. It's great to see so many recognisable names on the list: friends, family, colleagues, students, even my parents are here. I just really hope that you've enjoyed the event as much as I have. And you don't often get an opportunity to like this to say thank you. So I just want to say a few other thank yous while I've got the chance before making a couple of brief comments on the book. Thank you very much again, James, for chairing this event and also for mentoring, encouraging and your support over the many years that I've known you. There's also many other people in the Jubilee Centre, but also colleagues who are here, but I've worked with over many years. There's too many of you to name right now, but you know who you are. And your ideas, I want to stress right now, not plagiarised, but fully recognised and cited, are very much entangled throughout this book. I most certainly wrote the book standing on the shoulder of giants, and giants that I'm lucky and privileged, I feel very privileged to call friends, so thank you. I also want to thank Tom Askew, my editor at Little Brown. Not just for the champagne actually, that just arrived just before this started. It was very difficult for me not to crack into it straight away as the nerves build, but actually Tom has been real support and had faith in me throughout the whole of this publication process. So everyone at his team at Robinson Little Brown, the publishers who made Thrive, this book, a real thing, available in all good bookshops, by the way, is really, really, really special to me. So thank you, Tom. And finally, to my family, Emma, Isla and Sam, who in many ways are the stars of the book. I've written about our family, our digital life and the highs and lows of it. And many of you, and me particularly, was thinking, why am I writing a book which is actually probably taking me away from my family? And it's a question I've asked myself repeatedly. Why did I ever start this adventure? What really possessed me to do this? Especially because I think writing a book about technology has got particular challenges. Everything in technology seems to change so fast. The research, as I say in the book, has really struggled to keep up. The question of what impact the tech is having on me or our children is very difficult to know. Research isn't helping. But one thought really kept me going as I was writing the book, and that is the tech may change, but what makes us essentially human seems to stay the same. Our ability to be kind, to be caring, to be compassionate and courageous, to strive for justice, to look for peace, love, and other great qualities is what really ultimately matters. In short, our character is what matters. Character is endured as a central idea to what it means to be human throughout many, many changes throughout history. And it was that was reassuring for me that my character was the backbone of this book, whatever happens and changes with technology. And in the book, I explain how our best endeavours to show our best character and to be the best of ourselves, to be compassionate, to be honest, to be wise, is really hard. It's really hard in the digital world. It's why so many children's lives are negatively affected, sometimes seriously, by issues such as cyberbullying, misrepresentation, piracy, threats to their safety. There are so many new risks growing up in the digital world today, which were not present when I was growing up. I used to worry about where my daughter Isla was during what she was doing when she was outside. Now I need to worry about what she's doing alone with her phone in the bedroom. And this is why the focus of the book is on cultivating cyber wisdom, the ability to do the right thing at the right time when no one is looking. And I think a focus on character wisdom might mean that I'm critiqued for letting technology companies and policymakers off. Do tech companies and policymakers not have a responsibility? Is it all just down to us and our character? Well, of course, technology and digital companies and policymakers have a responsibility. Yet, as Nicky Morgan and others know, regulation in the online world is incredibly challenging. But in my book, I don't want to let big tech and governments off their responsibility. Just in this particular book, I look elsewhere for hope. And I think, if anything, we all need a bit of hope these days. I mean, after all, who is going to be the policymakers and the designers of technology in the future, if not our children? If we can help them understand that their character and, importantly, wisdom matters, then there is more hope that values rather than value will be designed into the tech of the future. After all, technology should only matter, I think, if they serve to make us more human. This is why I've tried to write Thrive positively. I did not want to add to any moral panic. Thank you very much, Nicky, for noticing the positive tone of the book. But I wanted to be realistic and critical, to look at tech and show how we are in charge of it, that we make it and we use it. It is in our gift, to a large extent, how it impacts on us. When I was writing the book, my children, Isla and Sam, wanted me to stress the positives of being online. I think they were pretty worried that I might be taking away their devices. And I have to say, there is no better person to actually tell us about the positives than the star of the book itself, my daughter Isla, who requested to say a few words. Isla.
Hi, my dad bought me a phone at the end of year 6. I was so excited to be finally getting a phone. I used it mainly to text people and take photos. When I joined secondary school, I used it to communicate with my old friends from primary school and my new friends. It's really useful during lockdown to FaceTime people and text them. My phone is filled with memories of photos I have taken of my friends and family. Throughout my time with having the phone, my dad has helped me and encouraged me to use the phone safely. When I think back, I feel that the phone has changed my life by making it better.
Thank you so much indeed, Isla. I promise you Isla wasn't paid for any of that endorsement, and I have to say that is our homeschooling done for the day. So I just want to finish just by a few words, just to say in our house, the book has actually been a great sport for Isla and Sam to read out sections to me and say, Dad, you don't do that. Dad, you don't do that. I think they saw into my fallibility as a human and as a parent, and I'm pleased they did. Of course, we all make mistakes and we're all in some form imperfect, but this does not mean we should not strive to be better. And I believe that's at the heart of what developing cyber wisdom is. Living authentically and living vulnerably in the world and learning from that experience with help from teachers, parents, peers and friends around us. They are the people who help us develop wisdom. So ultimately, my aim for the book, and hopefully if you buy it, I'll be encouraging you to buy it and read it, is to provide a practical and hopefully realistic parenting model and guide based on sound theory that will help you negotiate the challenging terrains when your children first go online. I hope, if nothing else, the book gets you thinking and talking about our children and their use of technology might contribute to their own, as well as our collective human flourishing. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you very much, Tom. If we had the opportunity to clap, we would be clapping now, okay? Tom came up with the idea of cyber phronesis, the idea of cyber wisdom, in his PhD. So as you know, I supervised Tom for his PhD, and the first time I came across the word cyber phronesis, meaning cyber wisdom, was when Tom came to me and says, this is what we should be doing. He did that about 8 years ago. So I'm sure you came up with that, that combination of terms, Tom. Okay, we're going to go immediately to questions, and we have the first question for Nicky Morgan. So, is preparing policy to deliver character development for children online the responsibility of the DFE or the DCMS?
Well, good question. I suppose the straight answer, I think it probably is Department for Education, in the sense that the overall responsibility for the curriculum in government rests with the Department for Education. But in the same way that school sport draws on the expertise of the sports team in Department of Culture, Media and Sport, I think that DFE would work with DCMS together. I don't think it's a great secret for any of you who've worked with bits of government to know that working cross-department can sometimes be a bit of a challenge, and I think often it depends very much on the character, on the motivations, on the interests of particular ministers as well. But I think, as other speakers said, what I like about this approach is the fact that it's not just about teaching a separate lesson about cyber wisdom. Exactly as Kelly said, you can build it into other parts of the curriculum. And of course, it does then force all of the adults involved in to reflect. And the final thing I should say, of course, is that at the moment, youth policy outside schools in the UK, or in England rather, I should say, sits with the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. So I think a lot of actually what we're discussing here is very relevant in the school context, but also in the context of other organisations that work with young people. And I do know, for example, that things like girl guiding, they are really hot. They have badges and things on. They might not call it cyber wisdom. They might borrow it from you, Tom, but they do look at those sorts of skills, and that's what they want their members to develop.
Thank you, Nicky. A question for you, Carrie. Someone's asked, has your research suggested that young people consider their online persona to be synonymous with their offline persona?
Thank you for that question. I mean, I guess I would say it's, It's complicated, and it really depends on the online context. Certainly there are plenty of spaces where, like gaming spaces and worlds, where young people can be anonymous or pseudonymous and explore different characters or aspects of their identity. But increasingly, social media sites are anonymous, meaning like young people's names are attached to the things that they do on spaces like Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, has some special affordances. And so that creates both, I think, positive opportunities. Youth leave behind a digital footprint, and that can be a positive thing in the sense of showing the kinds of things they've been involved in. But it also creates a lot of risks. And we talk about the footprint as being something that can feel really challenging to navigate. So, so not entirely synonymous. It really depends on context. There are lots of opportunities for identity play online, but there is that huge anonymous or named component to a young person's digital life, and something that adults should explore with their kids.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Jessica, there's a question for you here. What advice can you give parents to help overcome some of their initial worries about engaging online?
Well, I would go back to what I said before about this idea about seeing it as though we've all moved to this new country, and this idea of sort of reframing it into something really positive, and that it's okay that we don't have all the answers. We're the immigrants. We don't have all the knowledge, but we can learn a lot of that knowledge with our children. So I think just going in already with an attitude of more humility, interest, curiosity, leave the judgmental tone behind. Sometimes I have to prepare myself for that when I go to speak to my kids. I have to take the judgment hat off, because they're not going to talk to me or be open with me or share with me if you come in with that. And sometimes we have that attitude precisely because we're scared, because it's not our world, it's not our language. So I always say, don't say no, say no, K-N-O-W. So that's how I would approach it.
Thank you very much. And to Kelly, there's a question here for you. You said we need a whole community approach to digital citizenship. How do we achieve this when young people are in the vanguard of digital technology?
Thank you for that question. So my read of this question, we get this comment often, is like, well, young people, they're media savvy already. They already know a lot of this stuff. And the answer is they do not, they do not know. So I think there's on behalf of adults, yes, you mentioned, Jessica, we haven't grown up with this kind of media and technology in our lives, but Tom mentioned earlier, like there's a set of foundational virtue ethics that go across the board. It doesn't, because what's going to happen is tomorrow it's not going to be TikTok, and it'll be something else, right? And so the tools will change, but the foundation stays the same. And so I think the goal here is to equip teachers and parents with to make it less foreign to them, and by equip them with the resources and the information, but also having conversations with children about their digital lives and encouraging parents to talk about these things together. So, even though we may be intimidated as adults, not knowing everything, you don't need to know everything to teach this set of competencies, skills, and dispositions to children, to teach character to children. So, I will leave it at that. Hopefully that is answering the question, but, and, I'll just add to that. Young people, we find that the situations that work is which young people are seen as actually playing a big role in defining what that looks like in the home and in the school. So if there are opportunities for young people to define what the norms are, to define expectations and what they want, then that is part of creating the culture.
Thank you very much, Kelly. We do have other questions, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to put those questions to our speakers because we've only got 5 minutes left, and I want to leave the last word to Tom. So thank you very much to all the speakers and to everyone who's joined us this evening. I just want to say also thank you to Danielle, our centre manager, who's organised this, and Nicky, and of course, Becky, and also our Joe, who sort of organised the technology for this evening. So I want to thank all of them for their contribution to make this possible this evening. So thank you very much to them. And I want you to listen to Tom for the last couple of minutes.
Thank you very much, James. And yeah, and I just want to repeat a thanks to Becky, Joe and Danielle and others within the Jubilee Centre who have really made this event possible and made it as much as my nerves and anticipation was growing over the time to make it as a really enjoyable experience. And thank you again to Nicky, Kelly, Carrie and Jessica for speaking at my launch day. I gained more and more confidence as you said yes to come along and speak to us today. I really hope that you've enjoyed this event this evening, the launch. I feel immensely kind of proud to have published a book, and now I wait to see how it does. Today is the official launch day of the book, and I really would welcome hearing from you should you buy the book, about what you think about it, and engaging in dialogue on what I think is an incredibly, one of the, I would say this because obviously I work in this area, but one of the more important questions of the day. Digital, as we know what's happening in politics, what's happening in kind of societies, you just think about how much the internet has helped us throughout the pandemic in so many different situations. The online world is so central to all of our lives, and if we can really have that focus on character and wisdom, which is difficult. I was so nervous when my daughter first got her phone, as I talk about, you know, it was a nervous moment that when she first got it, but if we can focus on character and wisdom, then hopefully we should all be able to thrive in the future. So thank you so much indeed for so many of you turning out today. It's really been a lovely evening, and I for one cannot wait to get stuck into that champagne that turned up to celebrate and toast the beginning and launch of this book. So thank you very much indeed.